And we are live, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture, as well as the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. Today is Friday, April the 23rd, 2021. And we have with us a very special guest all the way out of Philadelphia, PA, Miss Stephanie Renée, who's a singer, a poet, an organizer, and voice over the whole nine. She's just a phenomenal woman. And we're going to get into her life and her music and her poetry and who she knows and what she knows. All that and more when we return in just a sec. Blessings. Thank you all for joining. We know that y'all could be anywhere in these COVID streets, but you chose to be with us today. So I just want to thank all of you, those of you who are catching us live, and of course, those of you who will be catching the archive. And I know it's been a minute since I've been doing it on Friday nights. But, you know, I have a new job, and so my schedule is a little different. So we'll be adjusting, you know, the shows and things. And so I will, of course, keep you all updated on the new programs, new interviews, new lectures, and the whole nine. And as always, I just want to encourage those who want to continue to support the program to join the Patreon page. That is patreon.com/asarimhotep. It helps to support this channel as well as the upcoming documentary film, Chiena Into, which explores the relationship between ancient Egypt and the language, culture, religion, and philosophy of modern Bantu speaking people of Central, East, and South Africa. So it's going to be a phenomenal John, as they would say, and your support will be greatly appreciated. So again, that is patreon.com/asarimhotep. And many of y'all may know that I will be doing a series on what I consider the African-centered high-value man, and just taking advantage of the conversation that is going on the internet sphere. But of course, you know, me being the historian I am, I'm going to do this retro style and go into the depths of our culture and to see what they say about the expectations of manhood and how we could bring that forward in modern times. So I'll let y'all know on the next shows when that comes up. So as I mentioned before, we do have a phenomenal guest with us, so I'm very glad that she has carved a little space to have a conversation with us today. And so we'll bring her on in just a moment. But for those of you who are here, I want you to first of course, like the video and share. And for those of you who have yet to subscribe, make sure that you subscribe. We're going for the whole 10,000 subscribers. We're a little bit over halfway there. And, you know, it would be a great help if you do that. So peace and blessings to Anusha. Peace and blessings, Donnie Williams. And of course, all of those who are on the Facebook, on both pages on Facebook, on asarimhotep, as well as the government name, Brother Harold Johnson page. Love and light to all of y'all who are listening on all three platforms. So without further ado, I want y'all to put your hands together and welcome Miss Stephanie Renée. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Brother Asar. Thank you for having me on your show tonight. And I was going to say, I also appreciate you sporting that OK Player vibe on your shirt. I've got DJ Jazzy Jeff gear on. So, we're both channeling the Philadelphia right now.
I got a little Dilla, though. So I'm
okay,
Detroit. Nice. So, I gotta represent. So they're connected. There's, yes. I always do this, this debate on who got more soul, Philly or Detroit. And so that, you can just imagine.
I would like to think that it's not competitive. I would like to think that we feed off of each other, especially because, Brother Kenny Gamble has been a really bright light in my life as a on-air personality. And he will be one of the first people to admit that he was supremely influenced by Berry Gordy and Motown. So, there may have been a sound of Philadelphia eventually, but the way that they built the business part of their empire was shaped by what Berry Gordy did with Motown.
Indeed. But before we get into these name drops and things of this nature, I want you to, for those who are not familiar, with you, tell us a little bit about, who you are and where you're from and how you got into what you're known to be into.
Oh, man.
In a very concise, way. We go ahead. I'm sorry.
Got you. All right. Well, the origin story is that I'm born and raised in Southeast DC. And so I am the child of two singers who met singing in a gospel group together. And so music and performance and all aspects of that part of life have been a part of my life since the very beginning, since before the beginning, to be perfectly honest. And so I originally started singing because I call music my first language because, in my house, everybody sang. And that was just a part of everyday life. And the writing part of it came because my mother was an elementary school teacher. And so she basically created the challenge that I should do work that she would want to take to her school, to her classroom, to put on her bulletin board and use to inspire her students. And so that whole idea of expressing myself through words became a function of the combining of the creativity and the writing, and everything else in my life has grown out of that.
I see, indeed, and many may not that are listening, know you, in terms of house music and poetry, and also you are the voice at the beginning of the Jill Scott, her first album that we first hear it on. That's you in the background. And you may not remember this, but you showed me around Philadelphia some years ago. This was like in the mid 2000s. I was young and ambitious, and I was filming a documentary that I got a whole bunch of footage, but we eventually didn't put it together. But you took me around Philadelphia to meet some poets, as well as to DC, and I think we went to a spot out there, and I remember going to your home, and there was a picture of a young Jill Scott, from back in the day. And so it's just, you seem to have been in the mix of, and I think this was around the time as well, well, I don't know how old it was then, but your documentary film, There's No Such Thing as Neo Soul.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was coming from Houston at the time. And so, that just, for the sake of argument, before we tear down the label, the whole birth and growth of like the neo soul movement,
Mm-hmm.
Out in Philadelphia. And I want you to kind of let us know, what was going on, what was the vibes, who were the people you were interacting with, at this point, and if you can lead that to the birth of the first and the original Soul Sanctuary, and what was going on there.
Okay. Well, for the beginning of that story, we probably have to go to, I think it was 94, where 3 brothers that called themselves Buttermilk Worldwide were interning at WDAS, which is our big, kind of adult urban, that's what they called it back then, adult urban contemporary station. The big 50,000 watt, it's iHeartRadio now. So that just gives you an idea of what we're talking about. And back in the mid 90s, they hosted a spoken word tent, or the station had an event called Unity Day. And that drew 1 million people out to the Ben Franklin Parkway, so right in front of the art museum that everybody knows with the Rocky Steps and so on and so forth. But one Sunday in August, 1 million people here in Philly just out celebrating culture, enjoying life. Excuse me. And in 94, I think it was either 94 or 95, Buttermilk, because they were all interning at the station, they finagled their way into hosting this spoken word tent at this event. And then they went on a mission to start gathering up poets that they had seen at various open mic events, and that were just beginning to build some steam in terms of names. So that happened to be Wadud Ahmad. Many people have heard him in association with the Roots albums. Ursula Rucker. Jill Scott at the time was part of a duo called Clark and Scott. There were a group called the Beatniks that had already, young folks that had recorded with saxophonist Greg Osby. So they were featured that day, and probably Trapita Mason, I'm sure, was also a part of that group, who is currently serving as the Poet Laureate of Philadelphia. So, I mean, I'm kind of fortunate that I was in very, very good company for that event, but that was the first time we had all officially been assembled. And I'm almost positive that Rich Medina was also a part of that group. And we were just young poets who had all met each other at these open mics. It was just natural friendships. People have described Philly as being very cliquish, but for us, it was just, this is the crew. These are the people I see all the time when I do what I do. And so it was just nice to be in that space. And then everybody from there has gone on to establish themselves in various ways in the industry or in their craft, and we've all stuck with it. And that's just the beautiful thing to see, regardless of how many albums get sold, books get sold, whatever that case is. The fact that we were young people who decided we wanted to be creatives, and regardless of how hard that gets or the challenges of maintaining it as a career, it's something we all have done, and that's beautiful.
Indeed. And how I first came across you was, just looking for good music on the internet. And I came across this online radio station called Soul Sanctuary. And so that's how I got introduced to a lot of, just good artists in things of this nature. And even up on my my house game, to an extent. And so, me being from Texas, it's very just kind of commercial R&B, hip
And
hop,
chopped and screwed.
and chopped and screwed, but like, so, but it would, I would always be frustrated because, I would hear these, these vibes, but I'm like, where can you go to just hear this type of music, like in not in necessarily in mass, but in bulk, like it's continuous. And so, and even at the time I was considering doing my own online radio station, but the problem was that I was living in an apartment, and for me to do the kind of station that I wanted, I would have to get business internet, and they wouldn't allow it in my apartment complex. So I can only have so many connections. But yeah, that's how I first came across, your name. And so I really enjoyed, what you were doing there. And so, I didn't know that there was an actual place that was called that title. And so how did that come about? And I know that, you had left it for a bit, and then, it resurfaced, as a foundation. So if you can kind of give us that background.
So I will not get into the ins and outs of how ugly the business side of show business can be.
Okay.
I will just say that I presented some investors with a business plan for what I wanted Soul Sanctuary to be. And Soul Sanctuary was originally conceived and created to be Philadelphia's equivalent of the New Eurekan Poets Cafe. So a place without pretense, where you can come see creativity in the midst of being birthed, and to also get away from the commercial side of things, to really embrace the idea that if Philadelphia was this epicenter of this thing that had taken the industry by storm, then when you want to get to know the artists that were coming to Philadelphia to get produced and just, making a home here in order to contribute to that process. And so, the people who patronized the club got it and were incredibly supportive. The business partners had a very different idea about what it was going to be, and it went progressively downhill until I said, you know what, I'm going to divest myself of the space, because what I want to do with this organization is so much bigger than just one performance space. And so I let them know that they could keep using the name until the end of the year. But after that, I was reclaiming all of my intellectual property regarding it. And in January of the following year, I incorporated Soul Sanctuary as a Pennsylvania nonprofit arts education foundation. And that's how we've been operating ever since.
All righty. And can you tell us a little bit more about, what y'all do with the organization? And
yes, well, pre-pandemic, we were doing a heck of a lot more than we're doing right now. Right. But the idea was always to be a gathering place for like-minded, like-spirited individuals to experience the culture in all the different ways that matter. And so that meant CD listening parties, album listening, however you want to refer to them now, since everybody's streaming everything. But, experience the music, doing the film became an outgrowth of that idea of, there needs to be a visual representation of this history. So, I've never been to film school. This was me taking some professional experience I had producing short form commercials at my former job with an ad agency here, and saying, okay, guerrilla style, I'm going to take a camera and I'm going to talk to these people that I know who are deeply entrenched in this process, and let people know about the Philadelphia side of the story from the artist perspective, not from outside camera crews coming in to tell the story, because that was happening everywhere. And, no offense to BET and MTV and all these other networks, but, I was tired of my phone ringing with people asking me, well, how would you explain, what's going on in Philadelphia right now? And I was like, good Lord, if one other company tries to tell this story instead of the people who are actually doing it, I was going to scream. And so, it became a project that Soul Sanctuary did with some students that we were working with as interns, and in another program that I was teaching with. They designed the first logo. They helped storyboard some of the ideas for how we would tell the story. And so, that's part of the process. Just before the pandemic, I had the distinct pleasure of curating an exhibit of my great uncle Maurice Sorrell's photography. He worked for 32 years as a White House staff photographer and as a Johnson Publication staff photographer. So his images were in ebony and jet regularly. And I have a lot of those outtakes. And I wanted people to understand that he was significant. He was self-taught, and that his photojournalism contributed to what we understand as the Black experience, the Black story. And I wanted people to be able to see some of his work. And I had no idea at the time I did it that now so much of that work that was published would be hemmed up in the big sell-off of the Johnson Publications photo archives. So I don't know when the legalities of all of that will settle themselves. So those photos that I happen to preserve are really a treasure. And, I'm looking for other ways to show them and encourage other people to establish their own digital archives.
I am showing on the screen, I'm sharing the soul-sanctuary.net website. So I want to make sure that all of you who are watching at the moment, that y'all make sure that y'all visit this link. And the link is in the description, and I'm gonna make sure that I put her other website, stephanierenee.com. So make sure that y'all go and visit and see all the things that they are doing over there at Soul Sanctuary, and in all of the video clips and things of this nature. And so, yeah, I understand completely the whole guerrilla, because I think that's initially what I was doing. But, you find out the hard way about sound quality and, mics and all this other kind of stuff. And so, like, some of the stuff I couldn't use, but it's still good footage. Like,
Yes.
I got footage of, I did an interview with Amiri Baraka that, the sound is kind of funny, because we were in a big public space, but it's still a good interview and stuff like that. So certain people that since I have interviewed that time have passed on, and so it is very important, keeping the archives of these experiences and these vibrant, souls who have come to earth to share the gift of beauty and art with us. And I want to know now more so, how did you mentioned that your parents were both singers, and you would probably argue just you're into music and soul in general, but house music in particular, how did you get into that vibe?
So that's a really easy answer, because all of the great musical things that I feel I have accomplished in my life have generally been spurred on by the man I call my musical husband, who is Damon Mr. Dizzy Fingers Bennett. And I met him just casually. He came to play for a Black History Month program with the Deltas at Penn my freshman year. And I was like, who is this kid? And at the time, he was a senior in high school. I was like, how did they even find him? Just really, really talented. And we became instant friends and have now been friends for more than 30 years. But I never kind of envisioned myself doing house. And he called me up. It was probably 2004. So this is right when I'm in the midst of shifting Soul Sanctuary to, being a different kind of organization. And I'm just going all in on the creativity. And he was like, I've been doing some stuff with this cat out in Jersey. And he's like, you write. He's like, I need writers. And I was like, all right. And he's like, plus, he's like, you sing. He's like, so consider, he's like, if I give you some beats, he's like, write some lyrics for me and then think about singing. And I was like, okay. And then I heard the beats and I was like, oh, Soulful House. All right, I'm down. And so that has, that began a at least 15-year relationship now with the Brothers of Steel Vibe. And just so happened that in late 2006, there was a management company in Singapore who had heard our stuff and really, really liked it, and was overseeing the opening of 7 clubs within a month on the island. And he was like, I would love it if you guys could come and be resident at one of these new clubs. And so, neither one of the guys were available to travel, but they were like, if you can go, we'll find a few musicians for you to go and do a combination of the live music and tracks. And I was like, I'm down. I got passport, we'll travel. And so that was a beautiful 3 months, totally unexpected. And now it's just a beautiful thing to have fans all around the world who are into danceable music and, not necessarily what they're hearing on the radio.
Indeed. And speaking of all around the world, as always, we get people viewing from all around the world. So our good brother Duarte, Dr. Duarte in Brazil. We got
my people. I have cousins in Sao Paulo.
Hey, our good brother Conan Lee out in the UK. You know what I'm saying right now. I think our good brothers in South Africa right now.
Can I just, I say this every time I see the South Africa is in the house. South Africa is one of the places on the globe that I have been determined to visit and have not yet been. So as the pandemic, I'm fully vaccinated. I'm just letting people know that I am free to travel whenever promoters and everybody wants to start getting that stuff together. Let's bring that Steel Vibe sound to South Africa, please. I would love it.
Speaking of South Africa, and thank you, Brother Conan Lee, for your super chat and donation. Appreciate it, very much, greatly. What is your take on the unique South African house vibes? That has been popular. Like, what is your take on that sound on house?
So I have a theory. Right? I have a theory that there are cultural power centers around the globe. I feel that, and I've had this conversation very specifically with people from New Orleans, which is where I intend to retire.
That's where my people's from.
There is a spiritual and ancestral connection between brass band music and go-go. And so there's a lot to that we like when you do a go-go beat and when you hear brass band sound, there is an immediate connection between people who understand those sounds, and you can continue to grow it. For South Africa, because there is such a beautiful soulfulness in all of the music that they create. I mean, when you think about Miriam Makeba, when you think about Hugh Masekela, right, that they technically did jazz, or what has come to be known as world music, but it's soul. It's just soul. And so when you have that kind of power in the soil where people hear and feel music a particular way, then it just naturally is going to connect with that. And DJ Spinna, interestingly enough, was the first person who made me fully aware of the power of the South African house market, because he was like, are you looking at your international charts? And I was like, no. He said, let me explain to you. He was like, South Africa is the biggest house market in the world. He said, people will tell you about the UK. He's like, they'll mention that. He's like, no, sales, dollar for dollar, South Africa is the biggest house music market in the world. He's like, you need to see how your stuff is charting in South Africa. And I was like, oh, clearly, I just need to study more. Like, I need to understand what it is that I've sort of fallen into,
Mm.
and be more proactive in terms of how this whole thing works. The trumpet player who went with me to Singapore, Kafele, I met him at Winter Music Conference in Miami.
Mm.
And he, since we did Singapore and came back, he's been to South Africa any number of times. Kafele Bandele. So anybody can look him up. Really, really talented. But he travels and plays at jazz festivals and house music festivals. You know, he is a gun for hire. And I'm trying to be like Kafele.
Indeed, yes. South Africa is one of my destination spots as well for a number of reasons. And it's ironic. It's not quite South Africa, but when I did my DNA test on my maternal side, her direct lineage goes to Southeast Africa in Mozambique.
Oh.
And, you know, it's just a continuum, you know, there and, you know, Zimbabwe, you know, and South Africa.
Yes.
So, but, you know, as a producer myself, you know, I just love like just the sounds and how they were able to take house and make it uniquely theirs to where, you know, you still recognize it as house, but it is its own vibe out of there.
Part of that, have you ever seen the documentary called Amandla?
No.
So Amandla, I think the subtitle is Protest in 4-Part Harmony,
Mm-hmm.
but it's about South Africa's heritage in using singing as a consistent form of galvanization and protest. And so the way that the music is so integral into their sense of self and their sense of righteousness has to marry with that driving beat of house music in a whole different way. It becomes the anthems. They can't help but have anthems because that's the way that they drive their lives, with the music included. And that the film does a really great job of telling that story, because they talk about the role of pirate radio, you know, and just how from very young the students get trained to sing these songs that are these parts of their culture, and it grows into the protest movement as adults.
Indeed, indeed. Speaking of the, how would you, you know, I know this is like asking what is your favorite child, but you know, in terms of the work that you've done, like what is your, I'll say your top three, so you don't have to pick one, in terms of tracks. And I wanted to play some stuff, but you know, YouTube be tripping with the copyrights and stuff like that. So I gotta figure out how to navigate that and make sure everybody get they due, but you know, that they don't flag my.
Oh yeah. Believe me, I understand. Oh man, of the house songs. Whew. All right, so yeah, so we got to do a smorgasbord here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, for a Steel Vibe song, that I would say, "Can't Steal My Joy," which is from our first full-length album, Creations. And that's because that was deeply personal. I specifically wrote that song for somebody. And I feel like every single lyric and every single note I sang for that song was done with purpose. And so when I listen to it, it makes me happy, because, you know, I feel like that was the first time that I executed in house music the exact vision that I had for the song. I would probably say Deeper Love, which is the song I recorded with a Swedish producer named Opalopo. And interestingly enough, he had heard some of the Steel Vibe stuff, and he was like, "I'd love to work with you." He's like, "I want to send you some beats and you see which one you gravitate toward." He's like, "I'm not going to give you any information about them. Just, you know, pick the one you like the best." And the one I picked was a beat that he had put together for a remix of Marvin Gaye's Sexual Healing, which I thought was crazy. I ended up writing a completely different kind of song over that beat and just loved what he did with it production wise. So that would definitely be in a top 3 of sorts. And then probably I would say um, the Joey Negro remix of It's Real. Because, you know, that was one of the first big 4 on the floor beat songs. And the original version of that was a little more vocally invested, and it had a lot going on. And he kind of stripped it down to the essence and just gave it that boom that gave it a whole different sound. And I really appreciated that. So I'll say those 3.
All right, indeed. And I'm sharing just different links to where you can, check out her music. And I know that she, has some vibes on Amazon, of course, Spotify, and I'm showing. Well, I was showing the Bandcamp link.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if people go to stephanierenee.com, they can link to all that stuff.
All right. Indeed. Matter of fact, let me just share that right now as well. And so I got to be the board master and host.
Yeah. StreamYard, the people need to understand that using this technology is not for the faint of heart. But your production values are great, man.
I appreciate it. Now I got too many windows open. I'm trying to see which. There we go. And so y'all make sure that y'all visit this link. This is stephanierenee.com. And where are we going to go? I mean, there's the listening booth.
Yeah, listening booth is where you can find the songs.
Yeah, so, make sure that y'all check her out here. And
yeah, Track Sources widgets sometimes act real funky. So the little widget at the top is from Spotify. And that's a combination of my acapella stuff, the house stuff, just all kinds of music I've recorded over the years. Track Source, of course, is the one-stop shop, especially for independently produced house. And I'm not sure what's below that.
Well, it could be my slow connection
up right now.
So I'm don't be too hard on yourself. I'm out here, and this is what the About Us page. And so you get to know, more about our guest and what she's been up to and doing, and testimonials, and, the whole nine. So make sure that y'all visit stephanierenee.com, and of course the Soul Sanctuary .net. And, getting back to the poetry, how is, and it's ironic because I moved to Philly, and I'm back here in Texas for a year, and so then I'll be back in Philly. So all my stuff is in Philly right now, and then I think it's like one of my first visits there, like at that time, because I think at the time that I came initially, and we initially met, it was right after this big flood that happened. And like, it was unexpected because you don't normally see a flood of that magnitude on the East Coast. But, it was, a lot of people may not know, because they know me more for, the kind of hardcore intellectual, doing history, language, linguistics, and stuff like that.
Yeah, you give them a peek into your cultural self, your other cultural self.
So many don't know me too much on this channel, for the spoken word. And I used to travel, the country a lot, and not only, perform and interview a lot of poets, but it was just something about the Philly scene that I just really, loved. I'm like, you know what, I think I'm gonna move here. And some years later, that ended up happening. And so, and I want to get your take on, what is the scene like now if you're still connected into it? And, you know, some of your, you know, favorite artists, spoken word artists coming out of the scene that we should, you know, kind of keep an eye on, that you think will make some headways in the future.
Yeah. So I am very hesitant to call names because invariably you forget somebody who, you know what I mean? Whew. And there are so many different kinds of voices that I just think people need to be curious. And one of the things that I wish for the scene again is the same wish that I have for hip hop. There was a time in hip hop where it was perfectly fine for you not to sound like everybody else who was making music at the time. You know, that gangsta, if we want to call it that the NWAs of the world, the NWAs and the Snoops of the world could live right next door, basically, to Jurassic 5 and the hieroglyphics. And, you know, and that there was room for a Lauryn Hill and a Megan Thee Stallion and a Cardi B. You know what I mean? Like, everybody was welcome in the pool. Slam competitions changed it. And when people started getting famous for competing with their work, it started to sound very similar. Not to say that they had the same stories. They didn't. But it started, the cadence, like the very sound of it started to become very normalized. And so what I appreciate now is that younger people have started to push back against it. And that's one of the reasons why I love Amanda Gorman, because the cadence is still very familiar, but she doesn't go out of her way to overemphasize. Her rhyme scheme is just present. And she's going to say the poem the way she says it. You can catch it or it might go past you. But she says it the way she writes it and the way she intends it. And she leaves it to you to catch up and hear it. And I hope that a whole new, a new generation of poets will take stock of her beauty and grace and delivery and understand that it's perfectly okay for them to be themselves, whatever that sounds and looks like.
And it's ironic that you make that observation, because that's an observation that I made some years ago, and especially going to New York. And I was, you know, my first time out of college going to New York and really trying to get on the poetry scene there. It was nothing but slam. Like, I'm like, where's just the regular poetry spots? Like, every place that we went to, it was a slam. And then of course, because you got to do it in 3 minutes, everybody's kind of, you know, you can't really slow down with the words. They're trying to get so much out, and then of course they're trying to differentiate themselves. So they got to do all the extra acting, you know, saying along with it. And that's something like I miss from, like, you know, the mid 90s and the early 2000s. It was just like everyone it's just, as you said, everyone was different, and everyone, like, everything sat in the same, you know, saying space until, so that's so it's ironic that I'm not the only one who saw that, and, you know, and it seems like that kind of spread everywhere else. Well, since you don't want to name names, I'll ask you the same question in a different way.
Okay.
What names that we already know or should know that back in the early days you were like, they're going to be something, like you like you just had this feeling like they're going to be someone, you know, saying big?
I don't think anybody would have been in Jill's aura and not expected her to be great. Because she's an Aries. B, because she is determined to be great. And so, you know, it's one thing to go, I'm working on an idea and I'm sharing this piece that I just started writing a few minutes ago because I want to test it out on y'all. And you knew that once you heard that, the next time you heard it, it was going to be some whole other next level thing, because she wasn't going to just let it be this little nugget of something that she just tossed out there. And it was going to flesh itself out and be a work of art. Rich Medina, the same thing. You know, first of all, he's 6'5", he's got that voice, so it's a presence, right? And you know, when I met Rich, he was working in sales for a pharmaceutical company, legal, right? And so I was like, what in the world? Like, his whole presence, I was like, that's not gonna last long. I was like, the money's probably really good. That's just not gonna last long. That's not the vibe you give out. I couldn't imagine him being happy. And you know, the minute that it went from I'm writing poems and I'm sharing them at open mics to getting the first opportunity to write a poem for a Nike commercial and do other voiceover jobs, I was like, and there you have it. So even aside from the DJing, which he's wonderful at, he would have still been a creative professional because it's just what he comes with. And same thing with Ursula, that, you know, her no nonsense way of writing about really painful things and squeezing beauty out of the pain was profound to me, because I, you know, like if I'm singing an emotional song, my voice cracks. Like it's hard for me to contain it. She like sharpens it like the tip of a spear. And, you know, and she throws it right at you. Like, you can't avoid this pain. I'm giving it to you raw, and then I need you to process. And I think there's something really, really beautiful about that.
You know, we would always, for those of us, you know, who aren't originally from, you know, Pennsylvania, New York, this Black Lily experience. And, you know, were you around that, and what was the vibe, you know, on the musical side, you know, of that experience of that time? What could you say about, you know,
okay, so I'm going to sidestep my way into this.
All right.
I am a cultural destination traveler.
All right.
And I feel like I have chosen very well the moments when I experience certain things, because that lineup setup is probably not going to happen again. And so, you know, in that context, I feel like Black Lily will never happen again. The music industry has changed far too much. A lot of people don't realize that Black Lily was able to be birthed because a group called Jazzy Fat Nasties were signed to MCA Records as a part of the Roots Crew deals that they were helping to get formed. And instead of taking their marketing budget and, you know, doing all the fancy photos and everything else that folks do when they get signed to a label, they poured it into creating Black Lily, a showcase for all kinds of talent. And so it was a moment. And the Black Lily that happened, what's really crazy is the 5 spot where Black Lily was held in the later years burned down the weekend I got back from Singapore. So it was very surreal, very surreal. But the Black Lily that you would have gone to in the first few years, whether that was in Philly and eventually New York, was different after people started hearing about Black Lily.
Okay.
Right? Because Black Lily in the early stages was mostly local, and people, whether they were poets or musicians or singers, it was this round robin kind of thing where anybody could sign up, and until it got late in the evening, they would try to get as many people on stage as possible. You never knew what you were going to get. And then Mr. Combs, and Badu was always in town anyway for her production. Janet Jackson. Once people started coming, specifically to be in there, and then if they were working on a new project, some of these folks would just hop up on stage and go, okay, I want to try something out. Then when that word got out, folks started moving to Philly, like, oh, if that's what Philly has going on, then I'm trying to be there, right? And so then you come because you're trying to meet people, you're trying to get put on, and it just changes the dynamic. And I'm not saying that was awful. I'm just saying it was different. And it changed the vibe in the room. It changed the focus of what was going on. And it was unsustainable at that point.
I see. We spoke earlier, of course, about South Africa and the house scene. And I want to get your take, and I'm pretty sure you've seen it by now. The viral video where the brother is singing to what's her name? Lady
Alma. Yes.
And feeling it. And then because I didn't know that she was from Philly. So I don't know if you know her or whatnot, but if you do, you
can assume that everybody from Philly knows each other.
Okay. All right.
We are a village that passes ourselves off as a major metropolis. Yeah, we all know each other.
All right. One, what was your take, saying of that video? And then if you can kind of introduce us to the lady who was singing the song in which that brother, was vibing off of. And
woo! All right. So the video itself, I cried because I just had not imagined. That man got his whole life. And it was clear. It was like one of the last songs, if not the last song of the night, because the lights were on, right? So that's when stuff is. And he didn't care who saw him. He didn't care who heard him. And he knew every single ad-lib, breath, riff, whatever in that song. He sang it like it was his. And that just brought such joy to my heart. I thought that was amazing and beautiful. And it was fitting that it was Alma's music, because Alma was one of the first people who I knew who recorded house music, period. And she got her start in terms of recording with King Britt. She used to be part of an ensemble called TNA. I forget what the sister with the T name was, but A for Alma, right? And TNA, tongue in cheek, right? But I used to get a chance to see them perform at another open mic night. So King has a partner named Dazia. And so King and Dazia used to do a weekly event at a club called Silk City. And so it would be live musicians and them DJing. And at some point it would shift back and forth between one or the other. And Alma was good for just opening up and singing in the middle of the dance floor. And then she would just walk up on stage and continue the vibe, right? And I was like, oh, that is a gift. Because a lot of people, I'm very in my head. I've been working hard on it to just be free on the microphone, but I come from a very strict harmonic structure family, right? Alma's ability to be free when she sings her music is just something I've always thought was an amazing, amazing gift. And the way that man reacted to her music is just a testimony to she connects with people in precisely that way. She's an amazing, amazing talent.
Now, I've been on Philly, basically the whole hour, but, you're born and you said raised or spent a lot of time in DC, and so DC and Philly's not that far. It's like a 2 hour,
Yeah, but their world's different.
But that's what I want to get into. What's the scene and what's the vibe, in DC?
In DC, oh Lord,
You know,
now.
I mean, well, okay, let's go. Yeah.
So let me just say, for the benefit of those people who do not know this, that I grew up in a DC that was called Chocolate City because it was vastly majority Black, and everything centered around that reality. So I never was in a situation where I was the minority, never in my entire childhood. So I never thought of myself that way. And there is an amazing power in having that be your reality when everywhere else just about everywhere else in the country and in the world, people are trying to tell you that you're a small percentage of this different whole, right? And so for me, with that being the foundation, I didn't grow up with self-esteem issues in that regard. I was like, I'm Black and I'm proud and I'm smart because that's expected of me. And I'm surrounded by smart, successful Black people. That was my reality. And that was an amazing gift for a young girl. Now, DC is not majority Black. And now we have lost not just the visible and kind of powerful majority in the city, but folks have moved out to the suburbs. So we don't own property in the city anymore. We don't have home base. In my family, we were pretty much 4 generations deep in DC until my generation. I'm here in Philly. All of my cousins are elsewhere. It's just very different. And so the scene has changed accordingly.
And I know that, like that's something that is, not talked about enough in my opinion, and how, for better or for worse, when the culture that comes out of these given areas where when we are dominant and how that changes. Like when I go back home to New Orleans, like in certain areas, the regentrification there is just changing, the vibe. And so, I was living in West Philly. And so I can see, the construction, and it's coming from downtown, all the way into 52nd Street. And it's and then when you get to North Philly and like it's just really, changing it. So I'm wondering, like, the survival, of the culture and the depths and the stuff that you were talking about, like, like can that in what ways could that be preserved, and expanded, in the midst of such dramatic change? Like,
so
is it possible?
I'm gonna say something that will probably be seen as a little offensive and unpopular. But I used to say on my radio show, ain't nobody signing up for a broke revolution. Now listen, I am all for the will of the people. I am all for developing a power base that is true to what the least of us need and that we as a community can provide. I'm all for it. But being broke should not be aspirational. We have to understand that we got to own some stuff. We got to have some resources to invest in some stuff. Presidents have gotten elected with a collection of $5 contributions, but they didn't get elected for free.
Exactly.
Right? There is a power of a collective dollar and a power of being able to tune into resources that we have got to be more aware of and more committed to in the long run. People might say that Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier were not necessarily revolutionaries on the front lines of the civil rights movement, but their fundraising got people who were in Mississippi for Freedom Summer out of jail. They raised bail money. Folks need that. Everybody needs to get in where they fit in everywhere. But for us to try and move forward in a consciousness that doesn't acknowledge how important money is to that, we got to do better.
So in other words, we need to get some resources and create a new vibe in a space where we own the landscape, and we, and that's one of the reasons we just recently had Brother Ron Green on the program out of Philly, who does the Hella Black shirts and
yes,
all that other kind of stuff. So he just relatively recently, opened up such a space in West Philly, that people can rent, and it's just like he has that mindset, and I like the direction in which he's going, and that's one of the things that we preach here, and having developing skill sets, raising funds so that we can own the spaces, so that we can tell the stories in the way
yes,
that we need to tell it. And wrapping up here, what is next? What should we be, on the lookout for from Miss Stephanie Renée?
Well, you mentioned your genealogy and what you've been studying with that. The last 6 years of my life have been a very interesting emotional roller coaster, and it's time for me to get busy telling that story. And so I'm going to be working on a film-based project that's part memoir, part educational, about that journey, and hopefully get much more people. I'm a very strong DNA testing advocate. I know a lot of people have issues with it. I have a very solid reasons for why I think it's important, and why I honestly think it should be a part of any reparations package that we talk about, coming from these sources that now seem so eager to get that underway. I am hoping to where I can't give full disclosure yet because the ink is not dry on the contracts, but I will be working deeper in the cultural space, doing some storytelling. And I will definitely make sure you're one of the first people to know when I'm allowed to share more information about that. But, the work of Soul Sanctuary in this space is only going to increase, as well as trying to create more vehicles for people to be able to experience our now 24/7 radio stream. So, that's also linked on the Soul Sanctuary website, everybody. So you can go there, you can link, but any time of day or night, you can go and listen to a combination of just the music that we think is culturally significant, and some of our mix shows and interviews and a bunch of our history in music and culture.
And I should ask, okay, this will be my last question. What, and this should have been actually one of my earlier questions. What do you study? What do you read? What do you, outside of the entertainment, like there's some cultural fulfillment and stuff to that. Like, so what's on your shelves? If we can see your shelves in the background.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm just not in the room where my bookshelves are, right? It is a lot. I read a lot of biography, and kind of parallel to that, I watch a lot of documentaries. I like the straight no chaser story from the person's mouth, or capturing the story through someone's lens while the history is being made. So, like, one of my favorite films is When We Were Kings, which is about the rumble in the jungle. And I mean, can I name a favorite biography? Autobiography. I mean, there's so many of them, but I encourage people to learn folks' real stories, not the biopic version. And yes, that's how you pronounce it, biopic. Not the fictionalized account, the real, how it went down stories, and be inspired by how determined people were to make a successful situation happen.
Indeed. And I know that, you just mentioned the film in terms of your past 6 years, but is there a book idea of any sort in the future?
Originally, it was going to be a book, but what I don't trust myself with those words yet. I think it's easier for me to conceive it as a narrative and show documents and show photos and kind of embrace that approach to storytelling instead of just making it all words and images on the page. So maybe a book down the line, but I think it's going to originally come to life as some kind of film series, film project.
Indeed. Well, I do appreciate, you coming on the show and sharing your story and insight. And the dog, it seems like, didn't disturb, anything the whole night.
Now, I honestly, I think he went in the other room and went back on the couch and went to sleep. He got tired of waiting for me. He was passively aggressively chewing a toy under the table for a long time, but he's not here now.
Well, I appreciate him, letting us vibe out, saying for an hour with no interruptions. But I am very grateful, saying to have you on the show. And I probably have to send you, because it's on one of those little mini tapes, the full interview that even we did.
Yes, please. I was like, if you can digitize it, fine. If you trust me to digitize it and send you the tape back, I can do that. But also that piece that you mentioned of Amiri Baraka, one of his daughters and I are in constant contact, and I'm sure she would appreciate seeing that, even if the sound's bad.
Indeed. Well, all of it is in my storage in Philly right now. So, if I visit, before I come back fully, I'll try to hook up with you if you're in town and see if I can get to see you. But right now, it's just on the mini.
Believe me, I understand.
So, but thank you for conversing with us, and thank each and every one of you out there listening. Make sure that you like the video, that you share the video, and you visit both sites. That is the Soul Sanctuary, Soul Dash. Make sure you put the dash, in there, sanctuary.net, and the StephanieRenée.com web links, and support our sister. Download, purchase some of her music or stream it on Spotify, and and look at some of the videos that she has there, and see the connection, see how it's all the people and places and her work. And so again, thank you, Sam, for coming. And
thank you for having me. This has been delightful.
If you have any last words or something that you just want to share with the public.
If there's anything to share, I would just say, don't ever count Philly out. I think sometimes people don't think of Philly when you think about the big music cities or the big cultural cities in the nation. You just, kind of skip over us to New York and DC or other places. Just don't ever count Philly out. There's some amazing talent in this city. And some folks are just really trying to find their way, what they want to say, and put that out there. And, there's a lot more yet to come from this place.
So y'all heard it here. Don't be counting Philly out, and one of the reasons why I moved there, even though, the vibe and the people, and I just knew some folks, and it is the libraries. Like, people sleep on Philly libraries. Like, I live in the museum libraries, there in Philly. And then it's just convenient. It's right there between DC and New York. You can get there,
yes, with a much lower cost of living.
Exactly.
At least for the next little bit. But right now, it's definitely cheaper to live here.
Indeed. Well, I'm not going to hold you up anymore. Saying this Friday evening, and but I do appreciate you, and I hope to get you back. Sometime in the future, especially of course when you're at least got an update, and of course when the project is due.
You can count on that.
Indeed. Well, thank you, family. As always, you can find me all over. And I wanted to say, that she's my Sarah
Indeed.
in this mix. And
First fam.
already. And so yeah, you already know I'm on every social media platform almost there is. And so y'all can find me there. So with that, y'all be blessed, stay safe, continue to wear your mask, wash your hands, use sanitizer, keep a safe distance, but keep contacting and checking up on your folks in these quarantine times. So with that said, we are out.